Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. There are a few more seats if you're coming in those seats in the middle of the rows that no one wants to sit in. My name is David Saunders. I come all the way from Connecticut, and I'm here with my colleagues Mark Beck and Matt Dandola at the door, and we're here to talk to you about dynamic assessments using Google Apps. If this is not the session you were thinking you were going to come to, now's a good time. I've done that one time so far to see, and I sat next to two women yesterday who sat down and said, I think I'm in the wrong session. The man started speaking, and they had to awkwardly get up and walk out. So if you're in the wrong session, feel free to head on out. Very quick disclaimer. We have up here a QR code. If you haven't had a chance yet to go to the link to a quick survey, we're just trying to get a little bit of baseline information about you. But if you use the slip of paper that either Matt or Mark or I gave to you at the door, the font that was used for that, there's no discernible difference between an L and a 1. And so if you use the slip of paper, you might have ended up on a Japanese website because it was a 1 and not an L. Thankfully, up here on the board, you can see the difference here. This is the 1, and this is the L, but on the slip of paper, you can't tell the difference. So if you went to a Japanese website, it's just because we messed up with the fonts, and you can use the QR code or the link down here for that.
Jan discovered that. Thank you, Jan. So,
yeah.
Making this truly international. It's phenomenal.
Fabulous. All right, so here's, very quickly, we're here to talk to you about how we're using the Google Apps Suite in our work with students around assessments. We're not really here to show how to use the tool itself. So we're kind of coming with a little bit of expectation that you have experience using docs, presentations, forms, and sites. If you don't, that's fine. We're going to be, throughout the session, tweeting out resources to how you can get more information, how to utilize those tools, how to learn how to use them. Our focus is going to be how to apply them in an assessment format. All right, so here's our overview of the agenda for today. We're going to very quickly, you want this one? Oh, sure. I forgot to mention this. This is our hashtag, Doug gave. Dynamic assessments, Google Apps for Education. Throughout the session, we'll be tweeting stuff at that hashtag. And at the end of the session, we'll be inviting you into a synchronous Twitter chat, the same hashtag for the next 2 weeks if you're interested in following up. All right, so check that hashtag throughout the session and for later on. Here's our agenda for the day. In a moment, Mark Beck is going to provide the context of the discussion around assessments. Then we're going to jump into docs, forms, presentations, sites, and then hopefully at the end, provided that none of us talk too long, we tend to be verbose, we'll have some time for questions and answers. And we'd also be inviting you to, how are you using these tools in an assessment format? I would love to leave here today, get on the plane and head back to Connecticut with some new ideas from you all about how you're utilizing this suite of apps for assessment purposes. All right, so I believe that's all. Mark Beck is going to give you the overview.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Beck. I'm a teacher, and I'm the Director of Professional Development at the Greenwich Country Day School in Connecticut. Anybody else from Connecticut in the room? Any chance? All right, 2 people. That's excellent. Well, we thank you for being here. We're very excited to be here, and we appreciate that you chose to be here at this session as well. We're hoping that this is the beginning of a conversation. We can't possibly cover it all in 60 minutes, so see this as the beginning of a conversation. We do want you to join the Twitter chat. At the end, we'll have our email addresses. Love to stay in touch, form a professional learning network so we can support each other's work. So when you came in, most of you, if not all of you, were able to take a very quick survey. And we did that for 2 reasons. First, we care. We want to know who's in the room so we can guide our examples and kind of speak to the needs that you have. And 2, it was a way to model using a Google app for assessment purposes. In this case, it was a Google form, and we used it as a survey, as a pre-assessment tool to find out who was in the room. So I'm going to ask David to click on the word who. No. All right, so this is what you saw. And this took us about 1 minute to create, maybe 2 minutes, because we were struggling with the wording on question 2. It took us a while to figure that part out. But otherwise, very simple to use. So this is what you saw. On the other end, Matt, if you could go up to if you can go back to the survey. Yeah, just go to edit this form on the top right. And if you go to responses, not that part, the responses, please. Up top. It says 170 plus. And if you go to summary of responses, very quick and easy to see and to get some data to start to analyze it. So a very nice spread of people in the room. If we look at the uses, for most people, it ain't their first Google rodeo. So good to know. So we're going to guide our conversations accordingly. Thanks, Matt. If we can go back to the... All right. So before we jump in to talk about each app one at a time, I wanted to frame the context of our conversation, and it's around assessment. And I came across this comic strip, and I think there's a lot of connections to be made regarding our job as educators. So if you can't see it in the back, there are these 2 boys and a dog named Stripe, and a friend says to his buddy, "I taught Stripe how to whistle." His friend says, "I don't hear him whistling." He says, "I said I taught him. I didn't say he learned it." And I think it speaks to the challenges that we face in our classrooms every day. And I would argue that for every course we teach, there's 3 curricula taking place. The first one is the intended curriculum. All the time we spent on our curriculum maps and our plan books and our pacing guides and all the materials we have, that's what we intend to do. And with well-intentions, we set out every year to do just that. But the reality sets in. And then the taught curriculum is what actually occurs. So we do our best to teach it. So if we have the intended curriculum, the taught curriculum, what's the third one? The learned curriculum, right? Just because we taught it and the students were physically sitting in the room, it doesn't mean that they've learned anything. So my job as a teacher is to figure out the question of the day, which is how can we effectively assess student learning? And that's the context with which we set this today. Some common vocabulary that I want to use in the room today is to think of assessment as having 3 different types. And the language that we'll use for this session is diagnostic assessment, which is the before learning, the pre-assessment, for the purposes of the teacher trying to find out, well, exactly what is the background knowledge my students have? What misconceptions do they have? Not only individually, but as a pattern and as a class, where are these students starting at, right? Very helpful information because it allows the teachers to plan accordingly. Then there's the formative assessment, which we'll talk about, and that's during the lesson sequence. And any expert will tell you that it's the formative assessment that by far has the highest impact on impacting student learning. I would say it probably should be called informative assessment because the purpose of it is to inform your instruction. And then we'll talk about summative assessment, and that's what happens after the learning takes place. Chapter test, end of unit test, end of the book, standardized tests. And the purpose of those is to take a snapshot in time to see what students know and are able to do. Okay? So the essential question is, how can Google Apps be used to assess learning? Matt, David, and I started using these Google Apps because we were issued our Gmail account, and so we're now a Google school with that respect. And at first, our learning curve shot way up. We were finding all these great ways to use them for instructional purposes, and we still try to do that all the time. But then we quickly realized for assessment purposes, the potential is amazing. So what we want to uncover today is, within the context of assessment, how can we use Google Apps to assess learning? So what we'll do is we'll take one app at a time. Matt will start with Docs, and we'll do Forms, Presentations, and Sites. Along the way, please do keep tweeting. We're going to build some time in at the very end to have a Q&A, and we will share this presentation with you as well. All right. my friend and colleague, Matt Dandola.
Awesome, awesome.
So we just linked out to a site that we created for this presentation. And before we dive in, I just want to kind of frame a little bit of what you're going to need if you're going to use these in your class. The first thing is that in order to use Google Apps effectively, every one of your students is going to have a Gmail account. It doesn't make a huge difference whether that's a Gmail account that they sign up for or whether it's provided under the school domain. There are a couple things that it affects, but for what we're talking about, you can achieve both or achieve all of it easily. The second thing, right, and this is, we love these tools. It took a little while to kind of get used to and play with, and that's definitely, there's that learning curve, that playful learning curve, and you have to dive into it a bit. But as you use them, you'll see that there are a couple of amazing things about Google Apps, and one of them that kind of links into the fact that they need a Gmail account is that it's all under one single login. So you don't have to go anywhere else for these tools. Kids log in once, they have that single login. They're not forgetting passwords to 6 different sites, and they can just access it through their toolbar across the top. The second thing is that the Google Apps are a wildly collaborative environment, and it's fascinating to see what kids will do with it once you open this up to them, right? So docs, for me, I teach both language arts and science, and I do a lot of writing in both. And as a word processor, it is a relatively simple interface that kind of mimics some of the other available platforms out there, but it does it in a way that there's not a lot of bells and whistles, so it doesn't become an arts and crafts project. You can really focus on what you're talking about. The first example of an assessment that I'm going to give you is actually, it focuses on using comments to provide feedback from writing, and really specific feedback. So if you can just scroll down a little. Earlier on in the year, we were talking a little bit about dialogue, and I ran this program all year. It's a kind of fun, gamified vocabulary program that each student in my class, they created a character, and then throughout the course of the year, as we played this game, they wrote that character's journal. And using vocab words from our vocab program, really, really exciting. But what I found was that it was also a wonderful medium, a wonderful avenue to address a whole bunch of other things. So we started talking about punctuating dialogue because I noticed that a ton of them would put in dialogue and they had no idea how to do this, right? So if you want to click on that picture, and the whole story of this game is around a shipwreck, so that's up there. And if you could scroll down a little bit, this character, so Callie was Christina's character, and keep going. It's down a little bit further. There you go, right there. So Christina was a really diligent student, and when she originally wrote this first line, it had no punctuation at all. So what I was able to do, and what I love the comments for, is that, opposed to a typical writing in the margins of paper, I have a bunch more space, and it shows up really, really neatly. And if you click on the comment on the right, or on that, it'll highlight which comment relates to it. So what I was able to do here was look at all of the ways that, or all of the errors, all the fun ways, the creative ways that my students were putting dialogue in there, and then take that as a formative assessment, right? After we had done the initial mini lesson on punctuating dialogue, take it as a formative assessment, go in there, give them feedback on it, allow them the opportunity to revise it, and then see where they go. And you can see that she's still missed something. Who's got it? What'd you miss? The comma, right? So I wound up after this, and this was just the second entry. So after this, we went back and we started talking about dialogue tags and how do you punctuate with the dialogue tag. So it was a great formative assessment. It led me to add an additional lesson to that part of the unit and really focus on that mechanic. As a kind of a diagnostic assessment, I took the same entry. So I'd asked them to put dialogue in this because we'd just done the punctuating dialogue kind of set of lessons. And I wanted to see if the next thing I was going to get to, if subject-verb agreement and verb-tense agreement, if they had any kind of understanding of that yet. So I went in here and I just started commenting on them, not commenting on any error that was related to that. Not like go fix this, but just so you're aware of it. So if you scroll down a little, Mark, can you get to the right of this?
Go to the right.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you can see the comments. Well, you get the idea that so then they started to become a little bit more aware of those, and I understood that by looking at everybody's entries for the week, that my students really didn't have a good grasp on this at all. So I did a bunch of extra work prepping lessons to make sure that I had the materials and the resources available for them. Right? So a great diagnostic assessment that set me up for success in that unit, or in that particular set of lessons. Another thing I've heard people do, and I played with it a little, one of the great things you can do with comments is you can actually just insert a link to either a brief flip video that you did or something out to another site that gives them an additional resource to read up on that so they know exactly what you're talking about. And it's really cleanly presented so you can see just what in their writing it relates to. Okay, so comments, great tool for providing feedback after assessments, but it can also be used, and this is kind of a fun thing that we discovered, it can be used as an assessment, right? So if you can go back to the site, please. Nope. Get out. So I'll get started, and then if it's the other tab there.
Go back to the site, Mark. It's in the tab.
Sorry.
So we did a bunch of work this year. I talked to a lot about giving and receiving feedback. So peer editing became a real vital part of the publication process in our classroom. And one of the things that it's really tough to get sixth graders to give pointed feedback to their peers, and then also to take it with a bit of a thick skin and not be defensive about their writing. So if you scroll down to the next one, and you can click in there. This is a piece that this was the second published piece of the year, and Cece wrote this. She's an avid horseback rider, really, really loves this stuff, so her passion for riding is in there. But when she wrote it out, I then had them, because I had modeled for them this type of feedback on their first published piece, I had them share it with their classmates and ask at least one of them to go in and read their piece and give them feedback on it. So if you look off to the right, Christina, who wrote the other piece, is giving CC feedback, and you can see that they're talking about semantics. And if you go down a little further, this is my favorite one. I'll just read it for a second. The way you constructed this sentence is weird. You don't have to change it, but doesn't it sound better like this? And she gives a suggestion. But I see what you're trying to do here. Right? So she couched it really well. And then the response, and this is my favorite, is CC replies with, is that better? And Christina says, defs. Like, awesome. Great. So their language is in there. This is all them. But what you're seeing is that both of them really took to heart these lessons on giving and receiving pointed feedback about each other's writing. So using the data in these comments can give you a lot of information about where your students are in understanding the things that you're talking about in the class. Cool? Okay. So if we go back and you go down a little, now this was a discovery that I made last year that blew my mind. It was amazing. So there are two tools, and they have really jazzy names. The first one is Octopus. Octopus is fantastic, and if you start to use it, it will make your life tons and tons easier as far as organizing student work and providing quick, really, really individualized feedback. So if you want to click on that, this is from my science class. And when you play with Octopus, you actually have to have a spreadsheet roster and a template of whatever you want to share out already done. But what it does, and I've hidden a couple of these cells, or a couple of the columns, because just take us off track, but it creates this this interface with a link to each of your students' work for that document. And the great thing is that you own these documents, so your students don't. And if you look in that column in in F, it says locked for grading. So you can have the kids work on it, and at any point, if you want, at the point that you've stated as the due date, you can put an embargo on any more editing. So you now have that document. They can still view it, but they can't get back to edit it anymore. You can unembargo it if you want. If you want to open it up for revision and resubmission, that's awesome. If you scroll down to the bottom and go to CCs, all the way at the bottom. Yep.
This one?
Yep. And just click on the link there. So from there, I can go out to their document. And when I originally shared this, it was just a template. It had none of the question. It just had that like question and then the example in it. Hypothesis, example, materials, a little bit of instructions. And if you scroll down, CC did a phenomenal job with this. This is an experimental design unit. They designed their own experiment and explored it. And her data, because Google Docs integrates so well with everything else, her data was in a spreadsheet, and she just pulled those charts in, put them in there, and then if you go down to the bottom, she's got a great conclusion to wrap it up and explain what it means. So now, if you go back to the spreadsheet, so the great thing about this is and I pulled the grades and the comments out of there because some of them are kind of goofy, and I didn't want to get sidetracked on that either. But what I can do with that, if you go into, when you load Octopus, Octopus is a script, so you go into the script gallery, you pull it up. If you click on the Octopus menu, at the top right. Sorry, next to help.
Sorry, right here?
Yep. Go Gadget Arm. This would be great. You know. So if you see, send personalized emails to students. And you could click it. What it allows you to do is to send an email with your comments and the grade in it, that it has a real personalized message, because it gives you all these options. Whatever. I could talk about this forever, right? And I'm not going to, because it's going to take us off track. There are a couple of great resources for learning how to use this that David's tweeted out. So if you jump on there, you can find the video for the Octopus tutorial. They've layered on another awesome tool on Octopus. There's an extension called Rubric, equally as awesome name, right? And Rubric allows you to use rubrics within the document. So if you create a document with Octopus, you can take a rubric that you create in a spreadsheet, and you can actually grade it right on the document. It comes up as a shadow box, and then you can email that out directly to the kid right away. So really, really powerful combination. We know, Docs, it's a word processor, right? There are tons and tons of ways to use word processors for assessments. We were actually really, really curious, and if you go to the next one, these are a couple of examples of how I've used them in my class. But all right, we have a wealth of knowledge in this room, and it would be great to hear a couple of additional kind of interesting examples of how to potentially use some of the features of Google Docs. If anybody's got something they would want to share. Cricket. No.
I have a question that came up on Twitter that I could ask you real quick.
Awesome.
You'd be the guy.
You in the front, yes.
Yes. What happens when students change the document based on teacher or student comments? Do you still see the original comments?
Somebody's getting ahead of the game. He's going to talk about that in presentations later. You can absolutely go back to the original version, and I'll take you through that when we get to presentations later, because there's some great data you can get by doing that as well. But I'm going to pass it off to Mark, and you can
All right.
head on your way.
Thank you very much. All right, forms. Forms, they're awesome. They're made for assessments. Simply put, a form is a tool that you use to collect information, to collect data. So knowing time is limited, and we're going to keep pushing out resources for you and ideas for you, and we do hope that you stay in touch so we can continue to collaborate. But I put together almost, not really a top 5, but 5 good ways you can use forms for diagnostic assessment, formative assessment, and summative assessment. The first one on diagnostic is survey. That's what we did when we started our workshop today. We use that as a pre-assessment measure. A flipped lesson. So putting content in a form and having students explore with that at home. Think about that, bringing that back to school, and then analyzing that information, taking it to a higher level back during instructional time. How about an anticipation guide? You're starting a new unit of study. You're going to put together some great statements, some of which are true, some of which are false. The pre-assessment allows the students to make a prediction whether they think the following is true and false. Then the learning takes place, and students can go back and confirm or deny their predictions. Of course, a traditional pretest and a questionnaire. The questionnaire I'm going to share with you in a moment. I'm sharing it with you because it's the one example that steps out of teacher to student. So we challenge you to just consider everything you're hearing today. How can you modify this and apply it to whatever your current positions are? So in this case, we use Google Apps not only in our classroom, but we use it when we have team meetings. We use it within disciplines. We use it within our division, school. You can use it within your district. And this year, or last year, we started our new teacher evaluation framework. And that's being held on a Google site. And David will be talking about Google Sites in a minute. But within this site, we have everything you need. All the rubrics, all the information. And this questionnaire, I'm going to ask David to click on it, is what teachers do at the beginning of the year. If you scroll down a little bit so they can see some of the questions, they self-assess off the rubrics, and they use that self-assessment to identify their professional goals for the year. Now, this is a form that teachers are using within our school as a pre-assessment for their own professional learning. So just an example of how that can be used. Very easy to create. The teacher has a copy. You don't need to save it. It saves on its own. The evaluator has a copy. You can access it anywhere at any time under any device. All the evaluators can have access to it so they can look for patterns to find ways to better support the professional learning that's needed at our school. Very easy and user-friendly and helpful. Formative assessment. Creating a form as a learning response log, the RSQC, so a question on recall, to summarize, question, and offer a comment or a connection. How about using a form as an exit slip, whether it's at the end of class or as part of homework? Perhaps it's a 3-2-1 exit slip, and you fill in the blanks. 3 exciting things you learned today, 2 questions you still have, 1 summary statement that you think captures the main idea of the learning that took place. Of course, a KWL, what the students think they know, what they want to learn, what they've learned. A traditional quiz, and a self-assessment is a great formative assessment. This is an example that we did about a month ago, and we were trying a new learning framework. It's called a SOLE, S-O-L-E, a self-organized learning environment, which has nothing to do with the topic, but I would encourage you to jot down the word SOLE and write TED Talk. Really incredible stuff. Matt brought that to our school a few months ago, and now we're all using it. So I tried it with the students, and I wanted to get an assessment from them on how well they thought they did. Is this a framework that they want to continue using? So if you click on self-assessment, please. Very easy to create. And if you go to edit this form, we can look at what they wrote under responses. Yeah, thank you. So if you scroll down, these were some of the open-ended questions about SOLE and how they felt about it. And you have some pie charts, easy way to analyze information. You have multiple views. So David, if you're able to go back and look at it from View Responses tab underneath it. No, yeah. So you can see it on a spreadsheet. You can order and change things depending on how you want to analyze the data. Thank you, David. Yeah, it's a list as well. So if we go back to the slide. That's a self-assessment. A summative assessment, pretty easy fit there as a multiple choice, as an ordering scale. So perhaps you have chronological events from a book or from history or from whatever you're covering, and you want students to order them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 based on when they occurred. matching to have cause and effect, short answer, open responses. Rubrics are easily embedded within a form. This is an example of a rubric that we used. We had our students do a capstone project, which is essentially a project-based learning type of project. And when it came time for their presentations, we had 4 different rubrics. This was a rubric on their oral presentation itself. So if you click on maybe eye contact, and it's the drag down piece. So this is on a piece of paper, perhaps it would be left to right. For the form purposes, we have it all right there. So as the students were presenting, I had my iPad mini out, and in real time, I could assess them. And as far as giving timely feedback, it's right there for them to access and use. Thank you, David. All right, so Google Forms make it incredibly easy to create, to share out, to collect data, to analyze, to sort it, to stay organized. It's all in one place. You can't lose it. And there's no, I forgot to hit save. It's always there, and you can access it from any device, anywhere, at any time. So I wanted to maybe take, depending on how I'm doing on time, maybe 1 minute, almost to just turn and talk, or just think for a moment, or tweet out, what thoughts do you have about forms? What questions do you still have at this point? And are you starting to generate some new ideas of how you can incorporate this? So if you just take a minute and just consider that. So whether you're going to tweet or talk it out, or if you wanted to go a whole group, we could certainly do that as well. So we're going to about a minute for that to take place. Yes?
At our high school and our middle school, we're very low-tech in terms of one-to-one devices and things like that.
Yeah.
We have managed to use the Google Forms for homecoming, prom, student...
Oh, yeah. Oh, exactly. So the use is, you sent one out for a birthday invitation.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So that's right. Multiple uses. So there is as many uses for this as creative ideas that we could generate together. I'm mindful of our timer. We're going to build in time at the very end to have an open forum Q&A. And again, this is the beginning of a conversation. We do want to stay in touch. You'll get a copy of this presentation and our email addresses as well. So I'm going to turn it over back to Matt, who's going to talk about presentations, and then David's going to talk about Google Sites.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I like this side of the room better, I think. No offense. I'll get over there at the end of this one. So presentations, most often when we think of presentations, we think of summative assessments, so the end of a study, or students reading and they're going to present this wonderful thing, and it's those couple of days where you get to sit in the back of the classroom and watch your students teach and kind of exhale for a second and enjoy all of the wonder that they can kind of bring to that, and their enthusiasm and excitement, right? If you want to click in there. It can be used for formative assessments as well. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of aspects of it that can give you some continuing data to kind of guide your lesson planning. So I'm a Avatar, The Last Airbender fan. It's a cartoon on Nickelodeon, and it's really, really well written. Don't judge. So we were talking about types of conflict in literature, and I'd done, again, the initial kind of mini lesson on this, and I wanted to see just how much they kind of retained from that or internalized. So if you click in there. So I developed this, this particular presentation, and if you go down to the second slide, originally it was just that segment at the top, which is a dilemma. And this one is great. Your mom is driving you and your friends to a big game in another town. You left with plenty of time, but she seems to have lost her way. Dun, dun, dun. Right? It's getting late, and there's no sign of the gym. You think you saw a sign back, and now you're struggling because do you correct your mom? For me, I get this. Absolutely not. But so what they got originally was just a shell. It had none of the text in it, no names, and it just said type of conflict and evidence that supports your choice. So I was asking them after our first lesson to go in and see if they could identify from the dilemma what type of conflict this would be, and then support it with evidence from the text. So once we read through them all, they all picked their own dilemma, and they then went to work. And so Richard got this one, and he writes, evidence that supports your choice. I think this is character versus character because it is the boy and his mom, not him with nature or society or himself. And his mom, he and his mom are arguing, right? Great. So I know from that, Richard got the main concept. But, and I'm not so sure that he's pulling real evidence from the story. Like, he understands it, but, you know, there's no quotation in there. There's no direct relation back to it. So then, as kind of a diagnostic assessment for the next part of this, right, we were going to talk about types of characterization. And I asked them to go back to another one of these dilemmas and look and see from the story, from what's in there, what can you learn about the characters? So Henry picked this one for that part of this and read through it. And you can see, just by reading a little bit, that he's really looking closely at what's written in there, and he's trying to pull it in. The mechanics, you know, need some work, sure, and we'll get there. But that idea of pulling from the text, and this was a pretty early lesson in the year, so it was nice to see, you know, who already had a little bit of kind of pre-exposure to pulling evidence out of the text. Now, that last line, or the last two lines, where he talks about indirect characterization, that wasn't there yet. So this is a diagnostic assessment, seeing what they know about characterization and what they can pull from written work. And then the next day we talked about different types of characterization, indirect versus direct. We defined them, and I told them, go back to what you originally wrote and see if you can identify which type is most prominent in the passage. So again, this was a diagnostic assessment that turned into a formative assessment. There are a ton of slides, and each kid's on there. So, you know, it was a lot of fun to create, and they've loved talking about this because, like, yeah, my mom's like that too. She, you know, has no idea where she's going. It's great. So you can get out of that one. All right, and if you scroll down a little, and this gets back to that question about what happens if students change it, right? So Mark mentioned a capstone. The capstone is this phenomenal project, but it's exhausting. It's 8 weeks of really intense group work, or small group work. So if you just click in there, I had a group that was super jazzed about NASCAR, and they have to pick a community that they are interested in, trying to come up with a way to better it, you know, to advance it. So if you go down to the essential question slide, their essential question was how could they improve the design of race cars to make them faster and safer? Shooting real high. You know, it was crazy. Lots of physics I didn't understand. It was super fun. But one of the things that you know, in this we're looking at is, are they working? Are they sharing the load? Are they contributing evenly throughout the group? So if you go up to File and Revision History, yep. And if you go down to February 25th at 10:02 a.m. Oh, further up. 10:07, sorry. And the second one right there. So this was the original, and when you click in this, it brings you back to what was there at that point. And you can go every revision. It does this constantly. So you can look throughout the revision history, and if you want to quantify it, you can pick up how many times each member of the group, you see their name in there. But more importantly than the quantity is the quality of what they're doing, right? Because some kid will remove a period, and it puts it up there. So if you just go up to like the next one and then the next one, and you can see that Charlie is adding to this slide, right? So you can go to the next one. And you changed it a little, you know, he spelled it wrong, and now you got this. And then when we get up there, the next one, this is where he stopped, right? So Charlie worked on it during the 2 periods that we were working during that day. And then you can go and look, you know, 5:56 p.m., Tommy jumps on there, and he's working really hard on it on the evening. Now, great data just by itself, looking at, you know, what they did. It was really fascinating because it created a wonderful teachable moment where one of the members of the group went home and took a couple liberties with the presentation and made some really fine adjustments to it, but he hadn't cleared it with anybody. He didn't talk to the rest of the group. When we came in, they were all really bummed about it. So it was a great moment to kind of pull that kid aside and say, hey, you know, when you're working with groups, you really got to communicate. It's really, really important. And it came from this assessment tool. So you can get data like that if you use it. And again, you know, presentations, primarily that thought of summative, but it's a wildly adaptable tool. So if you want to go back to our yep. So I'm curious because the diagnostic assessment is the one that I struggle with presentations. So any thoughts on how you could use presentations for diagnostic or formative assessments? Wow, you guys are on it for me. Thanks. Oh, I promised I'd be over there. There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
When you do the revision history, like you can scroll through and see who did what, just in a quantifying. Is there any way that it shows and adds up in a nice little chart like time or? No?
That would be awesome. I haven't found it yet. I don't know, you know, but yeah, that would be phenomenal. No, I apologize. That's docs and spreadsheets. It's everything. So you can jump back to a previous version for anything, which is great if you wind up kind of yeah. Again.
So when I hear assessment, a lot of times like there's grade associated with that. How do your students know what they're going to be getting? Like just by looking at the comments and looking at the revision history, is there like, I don't know, how do you quantify that for your students?
Well, so like a summative assessment would primarily be, you know, something that they get a grade back. The formative assessments, they get it's more fluid feedback, right? That you're looking to encourage them to kind of take that next step before they hit the summative assessment. I don't know if that was, yeah, last one, and then because we got to jump on.
But you would mention the publication piece, right? That step into publication. That's what I was thinking in response to this question. You might want to address.
You want to respond?
When they make that decision to publish a piece, it becomes that summative. And at that point, we're using rubrics as a way to give formal. Our school still gives letter grades, so we're still using rubrics and whatnot for that. So students choose what they want to publish, and once they make that choice and move in that direction, that then becomes a graded piece of writing.
And I want to, you know, we love the questions, but I want to kind of make sure that we have enough time to move on from here. So,
Good?
Yeah.
All right. Can you do this? And just go.
Click in.
Nope. Just next slide. Awesome. All right. My slides look a little bit different. I made a totally separate presentation, and then we sort of merged them together, so it looks a little bit different. But we're at a point now in our school where we've been using Google Apps for Education for a couple of years now, and are trying to assimilate it into some type of a digital portfolio. I don't know where you all are with digital portfolios, but it's something that we've talked about for years and years, and we thought about using lots of different types of tools for it. And this is the year that we decided Google Sites seems like a good idea for a number of reasons, which I'll get to in a moment. Can you hit the slide? So our school was founded in 1926, and I think ever since that first year, every student at the end of the year pulls together a collection of their work and goes to the print shop where they've got the printing presses from the mid-1800s, and they actually bind together a hard copy of their work, and it's called an orange book. There's this year's orange books from my class. I took a quick picture of it to give you a sense of what they might look like. Now, there are, as lovely and as wonderful as orange books are, and my children, my personal children have them, they're wonderful. They sit on a bookshelf, and you can go back and look at them. Once it's bound, it's kind of just a book, and there's not much you can do with it at that point. And we're trying to create things that are a little bit more adaptable, editable, modifiable, that can evolve with the student over time. And so that has led us into the digital portfolio realm. What ends up happening with the orange books is that you get to the end of the year and students are pulling everything out of their binders and their books and their desks and all that stuff. And it's not a really reflective process. It becomes more of like a competition to see like who can make the largest book. Can you just advance the slide?
Sure.
Thank you. So what you end up is a lot of stuff like this. You get a lot of like, yeah, oh, my book is, and they're getting the rulers out and they're comparing. My book is a quarter of an inch taller than yours is. And that's not really what we're aiming for. It's fun and all that. Can you go to return to full screen? Mm-hmm. So in our quest for, and then you can advance, our quest for creating things that are goal-centered, that are reflective, and that are a living document that can evolve over time, led us to Google Sites. And this is a screenshot of what Google Sites can look like for you at the next step. Now, there are a lot of tools that you can use for creating digital portfolios, and you might be using any number of these in different combinations or many more. And they're all wonderful in their own right. So this is not why Google Sites is better than any of these. These are all wonderful tools for this. We chose it simply because we're Google Apps School, and we wanted that single login. We wanted students to be able to go immediately and simply from their Google Doc, their form, their presentation, whatever it is, and immediately bring it into their website without having to log in anywhere else, without having to go outside of the simple ecosystem that we have around Google Apps. And that really is it. Now, Google Sites is not the most intuitive web editor out there, and it's far from it. It's something that I particularly like to do, so I don't mind futzing around with it. But other teachers that we've worked with have said, it's not quite as intuitive as Weebly is. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think the benefit of having it all in one place outweighs the cost, for me, personally. So these are, if you're looking at e-portfolio options, these are good ones. Can you advance? The benefit of having the Google Sites is that all of these apps can quickly and seamlessly be brought into a student's webpage. So this year, with my class of 16 students, I had them all create their own website. And they named it, and from that point on, it became a process for them where they went through the process of selecting what work they wanted to showcase. It wasn't the orange book, I'm going to see how much I can compile. It became a goal-centered process, and it looked like this. Student work, right? So within the process and within the ins and outs of a day, students are working collaboratively, they're working independently to create writing assignments, art projects, math, homework, whatever it is. And then in concert with their teacher or teachers or peers, they're getting feedback on where they are strong and have great ability and where they need some focused support. And so within that process, please hit the space bar, we then are able to create some goals for those students, right? Academic specific goals that are individualized to the needs of the student based on their work. And then those goals become the focus of the portfolio. So the portfolio is not just a catch-all for anything that happens to be in their desk on the last day of school. It is a focused collection of their work that demonstrates growth over time. Now, how does it demonstrate that? So if you could go to the next slide there. Throughout the year, we would periodically send out to them a form, and the form is actually embedded on my classroom website, where I would ask them to reflect on what they are doing with their portfolio. Can you hit the space bar one time? And here are the 3 questions that they were asked to reflect on. How does this work sample relate to my learning goals? So Matt had mentioned Christina and Cece, end punctuation, and sentence construction. If that is Cece's identified goal that she has created in collaboration with Mr. Dandola, then if she's choosing to put a piece of work into her portfolio, I want to know how does it relate to your learning goal? Because I want to avoid them just, oh, I really like this piece of writing, so I'm going to throw it in. Stop and reflect. Be intentional and be purposeful on it. Spacebar. How does this work sample demonstrate skill development? If my goal is end punctuation, and I'm choosing this piece of writing because it relates to my use of end punctuation, how does it in particular show any development or growth in that area? And then finally, the last question was simply, why am I including this work in my portfolio? And that's where they can do a little bit of the, oh, I think it's the best piece of writing I've ever done. I really enjoyed the character, the characterization. I really like the dialogue that I put in there. That was a little more open-ended. But I wanted them to constantly be thinking about, what is this cycle of goal-centered, purposeful inclusion of work into your portfolio? Now, anytime we talk about websites and the internet and all that, we need to think about who's the intended audience. The nice thing about Google Sites is that you have the ability to set some privacy parameters around it. Recognizing the privacy on the internet, and so we could have a whole other session on this, is more of a hurdle than a clear-cut fact. But you can, within your Google Apps for Education account, you can create a site, and you can make that site private, which means that no one is able to view that except for individuals, so you select for those rights. They can either be a viewer, they can be an editor, they can be an owner. And so this being our first year with portfolio websites, for the first half of the year, it was set to private, and they had to share it with me. So it was simply a conversation between them and me. Now, their Google Docs and their forms and their presentations, those might have been collaborative pieces of work, but lots of input on it. But when it came to the portfolio, it was just me and them. And I wanted to give feedback. I wanted to talk to them about, oh, what about this? Have you thought about that? Why does this look like that? But once it came time for mid-year parent conferences, this was really new for me, and I thought it was quite instructive. Parents come in. We have the conversation. How are things? This is what I'm observing, blah, blah. And then I was able to say, your student has been working on a portfolio, and they wanted to share some work with you. I was able to pull it up, and we could look through it. And then at the end of that conversation, I said, we also would like to invite you into this portfolio conversation. Now, I obviously had to talk to the students about that beforehand, but the beginning of the year, it was just me and the student. From the second half of the year on, it was the parents who were invited in and were given viewing rights, the student and myself. And now parents were part of that loop, and they were there for cheerleading. They were there for encouragement. Oh my God, that's an amazing piece of writing. I'm so proud of you, right? And it was just to give them a bit of an audience besides me and their peers. Now, I know that some of you in the room might be blogging and have that out publicly. Some of you might decide you want to do portfolios, and your institution would say, great, as long as we're not including full names or photos, whatever, we want it to be out on the web. That's great. But I just wanted to, at the end of this, just say, who is your audience? And just make sure that you're doing your due diligence and doing that in accordance with whatever the values and the policies of your school happen to be. Great. Cool. So we've got just a few more minutes left. Go. I've been following it when I've not been talking, and there have been some really good questions and some comments, some resources. Someone threw out the idea that you can also include audio voice feedback on Google Docs. That's something that I did not know about. So someone threw that out there that might be interesting to follow up on. Some conversation about Flubaroo and how you can use this sort of self-grading script when it comes to student work is out there as well. But for us, we don't want the conversation to end. We have so much to learn. Again, it's fairly new for us as well. We're trying to do as much as we can with it. And we know that we have a lot of people in here who have different experiences with it. So the hashtag is here. Please continue to tweet anything that you find around Google Apps and assessments, and we'll do the same. And we wanted to invite you into a synchronous Twitter chat. If you've not done them before, you got to be fast, because that stuff's going really fast down the screen. You got to find your thread and go with it. But Tuesday, July 2nd and 9th from 7 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. We're in Connecticut, so it's all about us. Eastern Standard Time. But hopefully we'll see some of you on there for a continued conversation about how we can be using these tools to better assess student work, because really at the end of the day, it's about how we can serve student learning, how we can make sure that we are doing everything in our power to maximize student learning in our classrooms. All right, so we wanted to open, what time is it now?
About 6 minutes or so. So we want to encourage people, if you could take the 2 minutes to do the evaluation. This is our first time presenting. We would love to keep coming back, and we'd love for you to fill out the evaluation so we can help grow as well. And our email addresses are here. And as we've been saying, we'd love to stay in contact with you, whether it's through that Twitter feed or directly here. So please do contact us.
And we just tweeted out a link to this presentation. It's a Google presentation that we made. Tweeted that out to you, so would have the resources there for if you're interested in it. But before you go, and if you need to run, we totally understand. I've got my bags packed for heading to the airport. But questions or comments or concerns or ideas for how you might be using these tools in your classroom or administratively in your professional development work or anything like that before we head out?
Yeah, so I just had a quick question, and if anyone in the audience has an answer, please shout it out. But I'm trying to look for tools or scripts or something out there, so in a Google form, as soon as a kid finishes it, like if we're kind of doing some maybe quick checks for understanding, if those scores would immediately come up to the kid, or the feedback would be pre-generated. So instead of then going in later using Flubber or these other scripts to grade and then send out the responses, that they're more real time.
Right. I don't know of one off the top of my head. Does anyone else? Autograph. Okay. Can you find that out, Matt? Autocrat.
Put it on the hashtag or something.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have other teachers in different content areas doing a site for students as well? Like a portfolio?
We did. We had some well, we had 4th and 5th grade homerooms doing it, and then we had a computer class in 6th grade where they were focused on sort of the web design aspect of it. Other than that, no, not really. It's
Within their site, they just have different pages.
they have different pages. Social studies, language arts, math, and so they could pull it out that way.
What we're hoping for on that is how great would it be that our school's nursery through 9th grade, that they have a site that stays with them year to year instead of just the year-to-year orange book. So it really is a snapshot of their work on a developmental continuum as they move out and move away through the years.
Do any of these sites allow students to take a video with their smartphone and upload it directly?
Sure, depending on where it's hosted.
But if it's not posted, can they just email in? Give you a sequel?
You can upload a video to Google Drive, and then from Google Drive you can link it into your site. Yep. And when my students figured that out this year, they were really excited. Well, thank you very, very much. Hopefully,
everyone.
pulling something out.